So we're very grateful to Gordon and Kathleen for coming. Their lovely daughter, Rowan, passed away on May the 12th, 2013, on Mother's Day, in fact, and she had a consequence of a concussion called the second impact syndrome, very rare event that happens when there's been more than one blow to the head. Since this happened, they have been tireless in their advocacy for concussion research and concussion management and recognition. In fact, Rowan's organs were donated, and the generosity of these two individuals is indicated by that very fact as well. They readily agreed to a request for a coroner's inquest following the death of their daughter, and the inquest was held in 2015, and Gordon and Kathleen were major aspects of the value of that inquest, because it was only through that inquest that it was figured out why she died. It was a mystery until then, but when the detective who was assigned to the inquest downloaded her cell phone, it was clear that she had actually had concussions in the days prior to the ultimate head injury, which turned out to be fatal. And following that, a number of recommendations were made by the jury, and true to their form, they sat throughout the 1 year of deliberations of the committee set up to decide what to do about all of these recommendations from the jury, designed to come up with ways to prevent this preventable death. And sitting there for a year beside Gordon was really an inspiring experience. And when the committee was embroiled in discussion about tiny points and not really getting the job done, Gordon would get up and say, now look, folks, this isn't as hard as you think it is. Just get on with it and get the job done. And that's really what we did, and came up with an incredible list of recommendations to the three ministries involved: health, sport, and education. And lo and behold, in March of 2018, just a few weeks ago, your Ontario legislature voted in what is known now as Rowan's Law legislation, which will take make great effort to prevent other kids from this event. And I think it's really a tribute to the Stringer family that this has happened. So, Gordon and Kathleen, are you one going to speak or both speak? We'll let you decide. So please come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Dr. Tatter, for the opportunity and for inviting us here tonight. Better? Better. All right. As Dr. Tatter alluded to, 5 years ago at this time, we were at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. And a couple of hours previous to this, we had I refer to it as that talk with the doctors there, Dr. Vasiliadi, who was the neurosurgeon that worked on Rowan, and others of his staff. It's a talk that no parent ever wants to have. But we decided to discontinue any more interventions. The prognosis was not particularly good. And so we asked them to, Rowan had signed her donor card, and we asked them to honor her wishes. And as Dr. Tatter indicated, she donated all the organs and tissues that she could. It was about 24 hours after we made that decision that she finally was pronounced brain dead. So she donated all her organs and tissues. They were all used. We got a call on Monday morning from Trillium Gift of Life that told us that. We've since had communications from a few of the recipients and their families, and that that really gives you some solace, some peace. After that call from Trillium Gift of Life, the phone kept ringing. And for the most part, it was the media. We didn't know, we'd been in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. We didn't know that the school board had issued a press release indicating that Rowan had passed away on Sunday. And so the media started calling. And we had to make a rather quick decision as to what we were going to do. Would we sit there with our family and quietly grieve? Or would we tell our story? And we made the decision that it was very important that we tell our story. So since then, that's what we've been doing. For about the first 18 months, we did several engagements promoting organ donation, which was an important part of who Rowan was, but also talking about concussions. In the full realization, as Dr. Tatter said, that Rowan's result is the extreme. It's a rarity. But it can be prevented, and it should be prevented. Her story can be used as an indication of how severe concussion can be if you don't look after it properly. About 18 months after she passed, I got a call from the coroner's office in Ottawa indicating that our esteemed Dr. Tatter had requested an inquest into Rowan's death. I didn't know who Charles was at the time. So I Googled him, as we are wont to do nowadays. I was a little astonished as to just the credentials of this man, and that he had an interest in Rowan's story. So I called him up, fully expecting that a man of his stature in the field that he was in was going to be extremely busy. And so I left a message and was fully expecting to wait until he had a spare moment. That way it was about 15 minutes. He called me back. We talked about his interest in what happened to Rowan and what his motivations were. And I was in. I was all in on this. This was, he wanted to learn everything there was to learn around what had happened to Rowan and leading up to the tragic events, in the hopes that that outcome could be prevented. Learn as much as we can about it. So the inquest was held about 6 months later. As Dr. Tatter said, we were so fortunate. The 5 jury members that were selected, they were spot on. They were just incredible in the questions. You could tell they were engaged in this. And they came up with 49 recommendations, the first of which was to establish what they called Rowan's Law at that time. And so we left the inquest, and we had the report and the 49 recommendations, and thought, this is great. A lot of good thought and good work has gone into this, and the first question I had from the media after that was, so now what are you going to do? And I thought it was a strange question, because I thought, well, we got a coroner's report with 49 recommendations. They're going to do something with them. That's not how it works. They could sit on a shelf and collect dust, and nobody could ever do anything about them ever again, and nobody would really say anything about it. So once I found that out, I approached Lisa MacLeod, who's our MPP, and I asked her, what can we do to make sure that these don't collect dust somewhere? So she came up with the idea of a private member's bill. She engaged John Fraser from the Liberal Party and Catherine Fife from the NDP, and they moved it through the legislature. The first piece was the Rowan's Law Advisory Committee Act, and Dr. Tatter spoke to that. And it was to establish a committee of experts to look at the recommendations and give recommendations to the government as to how best to implement those 49 things. So we worked away for about a year on that, and came up with a report about nine months ago, September. And from there, the government moved forward with the first of those recommendations, which was establishing Rowan's Law, which we have now in Ontario, the first of its kind in Canada. The work isn't done, though. There's still 20 other recommendations in that report that need to be implemented. So we're going to be holding the government's feet to the fire on those. I believe they're going to be implemented. There will be new regulations. There will be new requirements in school for education. There will be requirements on sports teams, sports organizations, to put in place structures necessary to identify, recognize, and remove athletes from situations where a concussion is suspected. That's just in Ontario. What's very important to recognize is the level of expertise that went into this report. I don't think you could replicate that anywhere else. There's no need to. The heavy lifting's been done. We need to get the rest of Canada on board with this. It's easy. The template is there. Just get it done. I'll make one final comment on events such as this. Research is such an important component of what's going to be necessary moving forward. We need to learn. We need to translate the knowledge quickly and efficiently into, I call it layperson speak. Stuff that I can understand. Stuff that sports organizations can understand. Stuff that schools can understand. Stuff that parents can understand. It's great that we have presentations that show all kinds of things going on in the brain and tau deposits and MRIs and CTs and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. To the person on the street, that doesn't mean a whole lot. So we need that knowledge translation to be fed out to the public, to the parents, to the educators. Quickly, efficiently. We also, and this is my opinion, given the dearth of funding in this area, I believe we need more collaboration. We need more cooperation in the space with researchers and research communities that do have funding. They need to be supported. Part of that support, I think, needs to be tied to the efficiency with which they translate their knowledge into something that's usable by the public. We're looking for, we talked about it a lot in the Rowan's Law Advisory Committee, a cultural change in this space. We need to have, there's a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. We need to have that village to be vigilant around concussions. We need to have that village to be on the same page. We need to have the educators, the parents, the athletes, the administrators, all talking the same language and intervening when someone may not be able to declare on their own, as Dr. Tartaglia said. It's a brain injury. Let's not talk about it as mild TBI and all this. It's a brain injury. That's layperson speak. People understand when you say a brain injury. And they need to understand that the person that suffered that injury is likely not the best person to expect to step up and say, I have a brain injury. Their judgment is going to be impaired. So that's why we need everyone to be on the same page and be willing to step up and make that call. The education that we're going to have in the school system as a result of Rowan's Law, I think that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. The kids are going to make the cultural change. Like they did with anti-smoking, like they did with anti-bullying, like they did with recycling. It was the kids that came home and said, "Don't put that plastic in the garbage." They need to understand, and they will understand, how important their brain is and how important it is to look out for themselves and for other people. So they'll drive the cultural change. It might take a generation, but I think over the next number of years we're going to see that change. And we'll be doing everything we can to make sure that that happens. Thank you very much.